All right. What's going on, everybody? Well, things really got heated yesterday or recently. I'm not sure if these were from yesterday, but I think it was recently. I believe it was yesterday. Things got heated between Dana White and Jon Jones because of the information that was released about what Deontay Wilder makes for his fights or had made for his fights this year from June of 2019 to June of 2020. Because those numbers were released on the Forbes list, and Deontay Wilder was in the top 20 in the Forbes list, a lot of eyes were opened. And one of those eyes that were opened, apparently, according to Dana White, was Jon Jones. Dana White has claimed that Jon Jones wants Deontay Wilder money for his next fight. That's what he's saying. He told Yahoo Sports here, an article written in Yahoo Sports. I think some of these quotes were responses to Brian Campbell, if I'm not mistaken. So White's claiming that Jon Jones asked for $30 million in order to step up to heavyweight and face contender Francis Ngannou, which is a figure similar to what Wilder made for his second fight against Tyson Fury. So I guess this was yesterday after the UFC event. This whole thing went on. So the UFC president told reporters, we have text messages from Jon Jones. It's not like I can't prove what I'm saying is true. But I'm not going to put his text messages out in the press. I could. Well, you don't really have to put them out now. You basically said what they were. So you kind of dry snitched on the guy anyways, which is totally unprofessional. This is one of the things I don't like about Dana White. He's got to be more professional. He's got to take some of these personal feelings, and he's just got to control his emotions sometimes and stop just going off and not being professional. He's the president of the UFC. He shouldn't be acting like this. Shouldn't be going back and forth fighting with his fighters on Twitter. You should be having behind closed doors conversation with these guys. So Jon Jones responded. He said, if you're going to stick to these lies, I'm going to stick to defending myself, he wrote. Please have your lawyer, Hunter Campbell, release those text messages. Don't be a effing liar. My reputation has already taken enough hits. I don't need this bullshit, Dana. He said, I never asked for Wilder's numbers. And how about since Deontay is making $30 million, we settle for half of that since you said I'm the greatest of all time and everything. I don't even make half of what Deontay Wilder makes. If my reputation causes you to undervalue me this much, just go ahead and release me from my UFC contract altogether. I'm sure some promoter somewhere will be more than happy to pick me up. And if I wanted to compare money to someone else, I would compare money to my brothers, former NFL defensive lineman Arthur and Arizona Cardinals outside linebacker Chandler. He has two brothers that played in the NFL. I see firsthand the way the NFL treats their champion athletes. There's a huge difference. I kept my mouth shut my entire career. So this is just a long list of UFC fighters who have complained about pay. And, you try to look at what boxers make in regards to the MMA fighters and the UFC in particular. And you see a huge disparity. And Dana White tries to defend this time and time again by saying, well, we pay all the fighters a fair wage where boxing just pays the top fighters. But if you look at the Forbes list, there's only one MMA fighter on that list where there's 4 boxers. So that's a contradiction right there. And by Dana White like airing out this information and saying he's got text messages and stuff, that's just totally inappropriate, like I said before. So a lot of people ended up being wrong about Deontay Wilder. A lot of people were always trying to put down Deontay Wilder's worth and underestimate his worth, saying he doesn't make a lot of money in comparison to Anthony Joshua, but they basically made the same. And if you take Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and Anthony Joshua, and you break it down what they make fight by fight, they're all pretty pretty much in line with each other. So for Eddie Hearn to say, well, Tyson Fury can't get 50-50, Deontay Wilder can't get 50-50, well, based off of what? According to this Forbes list, these guys are all on par with each other in terms of earning power. And you can argue that Fury's higher than both of them. And what really helped Fury is that WWE appearance. Fury has really done a great job. And not only Fury, but Top Rank and ESPN have done a great job really showcasing Fury to the American audience. Fury came over here, and you can argue that he's even more popular than Deontay Wilder over here in the United States. And this is a guy coming from the UK. So I think the way Fury has been promoted, and I was very critical of this ESPN deal in the beginning because I was saying to myself, who's he going to fight? But these two fights with Wilder really enhanced his career immensely. Look at his last two fights compared to Anthony Joshua's last two fights against Andy Ruiz. And you tell me what were the bigger events. So I think Anthony Joshua, no disrespect to him, I think he may have taken a little dip, whereas Fury and Wilder really ascended up the ladder with those two fights. So now, if a Joshua fight is going to be made with either Fury or Wilder down the road, but depending upon what happens in their third fight, the winner of that third fight, if they sit down with Anthony Joshua, there's no question that it's going to be 50-50. And I wouldn't be surprised if Fury asks, if he were to win, asks for 60-40. I really wouldn't be surprised. So the only UFC fighter that was on this Forbes list was Conor McGregor. And if Jones is the best fighter in the UFC, if he's thought to be the best fighter in the UFC, then why is Conor McGregor, a guy who lost his big fight against Khabib, why is he ahead of Jon Jones? Because it's saying that he made $32 million in fight earnings last year, from June of 2019 to June of 2020. And he made $16 million in endorsements. So he made $48 million over the course of a year. And like I said, he's not the best fighter in the UFC. Obviously, that doesn't always matter. It's about marketability. It's about drawing power. And Conor McGregor still is a huge draw. There's no question about that. Can't argue that. But if you look at it from Jones's perspective, he's basing it off of talent. And then you can argue too that, Jones has that checkered past. He's got a lot of things going against him that hurt his marketability, but so does Conor McGregor. Now here's the thing. Why does Jones get vilified for his out of the octagon antics, but Conor McGregor gets rewarded for them? That's a hypocrisy right there. That's a double standard. If you want to be honest about it, right? That's a double standard if you want to be honest about it. So I think that a lot of these fighters who complain about purses over at the UFC, when you compare it to what boxers are making, if UFC is supposedly doing so much better than boxing, then why don't the paydays reflect that? And Jon Jones, like I said, Conor McGregor was complaining about pay for years. And until he got that fight with Floyd Mayweather and really increased and enhanced his value, he was complaining for a long time. So when is Jon Jones going to get taken care of? Because if you want to be honest about the situation, if you really want to be honest about the situation, Jon Jones is at the tail end right now. He doesn't have much time left. So he's got to make as much money as fast as he can because the window is definitely closing on him. It's definitely closing on him. So we got to be honest about that. So I have no problem with Jon Jones complaining about the money that he's being paid, because if you're going to sit there and you're going to say that this guy's the best fighter in the UFC, then he needs to get paid like that. Now, obviously, I'm not saying he should get Deontay Wilder money. Well, I can't make that determination. I take that back. He probably won't get Deontay Wilder money. He probably won't get Conor McGregor money. But it looks like he's like leaps and bounds below those guys. He's way below those guys. He's not even on the same stratosphere as those guys, what they're being paid, if you want to be honest. So, Conor McGregor was off for a couple years. I think he was off for about 2.5 years. And he came back in 2020 against Cowboy Cerrone. And if he made $32 million on that fight, okay, in one fight, and Jon Jones, who has fought way tougher opposition recently compared to what Conor McGregor has fought, then I think Jon Jones has a strong argument here. So we'll see how this thing plays out. Jon Jones and Dana White have had issues. Conor McGregor and Dana White have had issues. Dana White's had issues with a lot of his fighters. And the way the UFC is run over there, it's kind of like a conflict of interest, because Dana White is basically in charge of everything. He's in charge of the rankings. He's in charge. He's basically like the promoter. Tells these guys what endorsements they can have. You could say what you want, but it just looks like it's a conflict of interest the way that whole situation is run over there. Locked Up Gary says, don't be hypocritical here. Jon Jones does not deserve Deontay Wilder money. This is the problem, I think, with you people in the chat. A lot of you, I just said he doesn't deserve Deontay Wilder money. I don't. It's a little sad that you guys have really comprehension skills problems, because you listen to things and you just can't absorb the information. I really worry about some of you. So go back and watch this video and try to find a sentence where I said that Jon Jones deserves Deontay Wilder money. All I said was he deserves more than what he's getting, in my opinion. That's what I said. So once again, people taking things out of context and skewing what's being said. So it's just ridiculous. But I think this just proves the difference between the pay scale in the UFC and the pay scale in boxing. I just think that proves it, And here's the big thing about guys like Deontay Wilder, guys like Wilder, and even guys like Anthony Joshua. But I think the advantages that Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury had over Joshua was you had two juggernauts in ESPN and Fox. Two juggernauts. When you put Fox and ESPN and you compare that to DAZN and Sky, the potential viewership on Fox and ESPN dwarfs anything Sky and anything that Sky could do. And then you take into consideration the advantages of a fighter fighting, a UK fighter fighting in the United States is they don't only get the revenue Tyson Fury not only gets the revenue from ESPN, but he's getting a chunk of the revenue from BT Sports. So when you look at the pay-per-view, I think that fight was on Fox pay-per-view, if I'm not mistaken. So you take whatever the revenue was from the Fox pay-per-view and you couple that up with the BT Sport revenue, and it's going to be a lot more than a UK fighter just getting Sky Sports pay-per-view revenue. Now, we don't know how much DAZN's paying Joshua per fight, but again, when you have the BT Sport plus the Fox pay-per-view revenue, and then you take a $17 million live gate, the potential for earnings for Tyson Fury to fight in the United States is so much more substantial than if he was just fighting over in the UK. So this is something that I think Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua need to look at in the future, to be perfectly honest with you. But let's see what happens. I think Jon Jones is in between a rock and a hard place because, he is winding down, right? He is winding down, and you can even argue that he hasn't looked great in his recent fights. He really hasn't looked great in his recent fights. You can definitely argue that. He's definitely aging. He's getting up there in years. And it's going to be tough moving forward. I think he should have probably moved up to heavyweight and fought Daniel Cormier. And I think that would have been a gigantic payday. But I think his decision to stay at light heavyweight for so long could have possibly hurt his earning power, earning potential, and his earning power, in my opinion. So I thought that actually Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones in the last fight. I had him winning the fight, in my opinion. And I thought, Thiago Santos, you could argue that Santos won the fight. So you can argue, honestly. And the Santos fight was a split decision victory for Jones. I thought Thiago won that fight, and I thought Reyes won his fight. So you could argue that Jones possibly lost his last two fights. So if you want to base that off of his last two performances, if he deserves more money, then Dana White may have an argument like, okay, but again, that would be hypocritical of Dana White to use that against Jon Jones because when Conor McGregor came back, when Conor McGregor came back and fought Cerrone coming off that loss, he got a gigantic payday. So you can't really use that against Jon Jones. Until someone beats Jon Jones, the perception out there is he's the best fighter in the UFC right now. Some people say he's the best fighter of all time in the history of the sport. So he should definitely be paid in line with that. In line with what his status is, he should be paid in line with what his status is, if you want to be honest. So you have to be honest there. And here's the thing. These UFC fights are only being shown on ESPN pay-per-view, where boxing fights have so many more revenue streams. I think like big boxing fights get shown all around the world. And I know the UFC fights get shown all around the world, but how does that factor into what the fighters get? Because the way Fury Wilder was set up, they split all pay-per-view revenue from all sources 50-50 down the middle. Okay? So I don't know. Someone in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but these big UFC events, is any UK pay-per-view outlet showing these big UFC events? Or are these events just being shown in the United States pay-per-view for the most part? If someone can answer that question for me in the chat, because I haven't really looked into that. To my knowledge, I haven't seen any information to suggest that these UFC events have been on BT Sport or if they have been on Sky Sports. But this is an eye opener, guys. This is an eye opener. So when you want to debate boxing versus UFC or boxing versus MMA, which I don't want to do, but a lot of people still want to do that, and they say boxing's dying and boxing is in trouble and UFC is doing so much better. Well, the salaries aren't reflecting that. They're not. Clocked Up Gary says, Beeb, I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago, Jones was given reasons as to why he'd never go up to heavyweight and fight the likes of Bigfoot Silva. Now he wants Francis. It's a big money grab, John. Oh, well, again, in fairness to Jon Jones, he's got to stop planning his exit strategy. He can't do this for the rest of his life. So he's got to stop planning his exit strategy. So I don't blame him. I do not blame the guy. He's 32 years old, but his last couple fights have been shaky, been tough performances. You know, and the shelf life for a UFC fighter is a lot shorter than a boxer. Besides Randy Couture, who I think fought until he was 45, he was one of the outliers. There's a lot of fighters that fought in their 40s, you know, close to their 40s. And even 50s in the sport of boxing throughout the history of the sport. Outside of Randy Couture, who really had a long career and fought at an advanced age in the sport of MMA and the UFC? So you may say he's 32 years old, he should still be in his prime, but the guy's got a lot of miles on him. The guy's got a lot of miles on him. And he'll be turning 33 in about a month. So he's 33 years old, which is about the same. I think Andre Ward retired at 35. Okay. Alexander Wilson, thank you. It says UFC airs on BT Sports in the UK. But my question is, I wonder if the fighters get a portion of that, or if that just goes to Dana White. I don't know how that. I'm not going to speak on it, but I'm curious to see if they get a portion of that. So, but this is the problem of fighting for the UFC, because in boxing, as a fighter, you have a lot of avenues you can go down. There's a lot of revenue streams that you could utilize. So Deontay Wilder was a free agent. So he had the ability to fight on ESPN. He had the ability to fight on Fox. He had the ability to fight on Showtime. He had the ability to fight on BT Sport, Sky Sports, DAZN, any platform he had the ability to fight on. So all these people that were criticizing Deontay Wilder for not giving DAZN exclusivity, they're proven wrong right now. They're proven wrong right now. Because if Deontay Wilder were to sign that deal with DAZN, there was no guarantee he was going to fight Joshua. And because Joshua lost, the fight would have been pushed even further back, and he would have had to wait for that fight. And there was no pay-per-view upside. In this instance, he had ESPN, Fox, he had digital platforms, and he had BT Sport. He had all of those combined revenue streams and sources to make money off of, where DAZN was only giving him one avenue to earn that money. So once again, these people who want to count Deontay Wilder's pockets, particularly Eddie Hearn, they're wrong. They're wrong. It made all the sense in the world for him to turn down that DAZN deal. And my whole problem with that DAZN deal was, number one, you're locking him in to a set purse without knowing how much the fight can actually generate. That's a problem, because now he has no upside. He's guaranteed to make a certain amount, whereas Joshua had the upside of the Sky pay-per-view money. Okay? And Wilder had no pay-per-view upside. It was totally an unfair deal. I don't know. I don't care what anyone says. It was an unfair deal because you're locking him in while the other guy has the potential to make more money off the pay-per-view back end. And actually, Anthony Joshua didn't have to sign anything because he's on a fight to fight with DAZN, but they wanted to lock Deontay Wilder in. So again, I don't care what anyone says. Everyone's looking at that $100 million deal and saying Wilder was stupid for not taking it. Well, now you guys look stupid because you're locking a guy in. Okay. I was proven right because right when the deal was announced, I wouldn't have, if I was Deontay Wilder, I wouldn't have taken it either. I wouldn't have. And I don't care what anyone says. The third fight's probably going to do 1 million pay-per-view buys. It's probably going to be bigger than both of them. I don't care what anyone says because now people are going to be hungry for big fights because we haven't had fights in a long time. So now everyone's going to buy the third fight. Thank you so much, Alexander Wilson. He says the DAZN is the only avenue for revenue stream. They only paid $4 million for AJ Ruiz too. Those fighters made way more than that. Of course. And this is not a bash AJ video because even though he fights on DAZN, he's in a great situation because he has that Sky Sports back-end money. But if they were smart, why would you not want to fight Fury on ESPN pay-per-view, okay? In Sky Sports pay-per-view. Why wouldn't you want that instead of having DAZN have exclusivity to the fight, and then they only get the pay-per-view from Sky Sports and BT Sports? Because if Fury was to fight Joshua, there's no way they would give DAZN exclusive broadcasting rights for the fight to be shown in America. It would make zero sense to do that. Exactly. DAZN does limit AJ's earning potential in the United States. I don't understand. Like, Eddie Hearn has to be looking at this right now, and he has to see how could Deontay Wilder, a guy who's nowhere near as popular worldwide as my fighter, making just about the same as he made in that 1 year period. So all these people that said that the DAZN deal was a good deal, they're wrong. They're wrong. They're totally wrong. So now Deontay Wilder is not locked in. He can go anywhere. He could still shop himself. And this is why people want to criticize the way PBC does things, but they do things like this way because this is a constantly evolving business. And to be perfectly honest with you, no one really anticipated how big Fury was gonna be in the United States. By him being on all those Fox, this is another advantage. Advertisement. Fox has a lot of sports shows. They have football games, which a lot of people watch. Fox is in every single United States home in the country that has a television set. ESPN is on a lot of is in a lot of homes too, on a lot of people's cable package. Okay. The potential to be showcased and just be forced down people's throat. Every football game, they were talking about the Fury Wilder fight. Every sports show, they were talking about it on Undisputed, First Take, Colin Cowherd, all these shows, pardon the interruption. You don't get that same exposure on DAZN. You just don't. And that's how come Wilder and Fury, in a short period of time, caught up to AJ. They caught up to AJ. Imagine if AJ had that same exposure in the United States, how much bigger he would be. That's why Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson are in the record books for the highest growth, for the highest grossing heavyweight fight in history. That's why they're in the record books for that. Because Lennox Lewis came over here and fought on American pay-per-view. That's what Joshua needs to do. Alexander Wilson, thank you once again. He said, I meant DAZN is the only revenue stream. AJ Ruiz was on Japanese terrestrial TV, which paid a lot for it. The international alone in AJ is huge. Yeah, I mean, but again, AJ's fights are not on American pay-per-view. That hurts him. Look what Fury was able to do. He was able to come over here and become more popular than Deontay Wilder. Why couldn't AJ do that? Now he lost one fight against Ruiz. So now they packed it up and they said, "Oh no, we don't want to fight in the United States anymore." It makes no sense. Eddie Hearn has to take a look at this and say to himself, I'm leaving money on the table by not showcasing AJ on American pay-per-view. He really has to look at this. He really has to look at this. But Jon Jones seems to me like he's on borrowed time right now. And in order for him to really make a huge payday, I think he does have to go up to heavyweight. And now this back and forth with Dana White only adds fuel to the fire. Controversy sells, guys. So this could, unfortunately, I don't like to promote negative news and controversial news. I don't like to be the shock jock here, but controversy sells. So this added controversy that's going on between Dana White and Jon Jones could probably enhance Jon Jones's next fight in terms of revenue, right? But yeah. So I think if you look at the big picture, the money's still in America when it comes to combat sports. Money's still in America when it comes to combat sports. Because you look at what Fury, Wilder 2 did at the gate. Think about it. Klitschko and Joshua sold out a 90,000 seat stadium, and the event generated $15 million at the live gate in 90,000 seat stadium. Wilder and Fury sold 16,000 tickets, and they're generating $17 million. Ringside seats were like $5,000. What are the ringside seats at a stadium fight? Like 1,500? So it's not all about, everyone wants to talk about, look how much people are here, look how much pay-per-views are sold, but you have to look at the price points. If you're selling 800,000 pay-per-views, okay, it's at $80 a pop. And then you're not even adding in the digital platform revenue from the digital platform sources. So probably sold more than 800,000 pay-per-views if you want to factor in the digital platform, right? And then you compare that to Joshua selling 1.6 million on Sky pay-per-view at $24 a pop. It's a different ball game. It's a different ball game. We don't, in the United States, boxing is not a stadium sport anymore. It's just not a stadium sport. Ever since boxing, when you go back to the days when they had those fights at the LA Forum, fight night at the LA Forum, when boxing started fighting in Vegas, Vegas became the capital of boxing in the United States. Boxing hasn't been a stadium sport since the 40s and 50s in America. It's just a different format. It's a different market altogether. And I think it's much better to watch a fight in an arena than it is a stadium. I think you have a better view. I think you're more comfortable. If it's hot outside, you're in an AC an air-conditioned arena. It's much more comfortable to watch a fight, in my opinion, because I went to a stadium before to watch a fight and I didn't like it. I'd rather be in an arena, to be honest with you. I just think it's more comfortable. Alexander Wilson, thank you once again for the super chat. He said, "What's funny is Dana White said that Eddie Hearn is the only box promoter that makes money off his fights on Copbridge's podcast." I mean, Bob Arum has been doing this for 40-something years, man. I mean, he's no dummy. He's not losing money on his fights. He's just not. He's not losing money on his fights. He's just not. He's just not. So this Yahoo article, man, opened up a lot of eyes. It really did. It really did. But I'm really disturbed that Dana White is dry snitching on Jon Jones. We have text messages. That's some bitch shit right there. That's some bitch shit right there. You don't do that. You don't do that. Jon Jones is calling Dana White a effing liar, saying release me from the contract. That ain't never gonna happen. But why would you want to be at odds with a guy like Jon Jones? I mean, all the controversy aside, Jon Jones has done a lot for the sport of MMA. He really has. He's a great fighter, man. He's a great fighter. But if I was Jon Jones, I think my next fight would be at heavyweight, and I would try to, and that because that's the only way. That's the only way he's going to make the revenue that he wants to make. You can't stay at light heavyweight and fight guys that you already beat already. If you want to increase your salary, you got to increase your risk. And the only way by increasing your risk is by moving up to heavyweight. You're a 6'4" guy. There's no question that you can't go up to about 220 pounds, maybe 225, and fight at heavyweight. That's the only way. That would be the only way for him to have his biggest payday, is to go and fight at heavyweight. That's the only way that could happen for him. But it's kind of disappointing, to be honest with you, that there's only one UFC fighter on that Forbes list. It's really disappointing. I got to be honest with you. It's really disappointing. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Dana White has constantly having to defend himself about criticism about the UFC's pay to their fighters. He's constantly had to do that. There's been shows on ESPN. There's been specific shows centered around Dana White defending himself over questionable UFC payout to the fighters. It's documented. It's been documented. So there's a pattern here. And where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So let's take a look at Jon Jones's let's look and see how much Jon Jones is like only making like $500,000 a fight. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. His guarantee for both the Thiago Santos fight and the Dominic Reyes fight was $500,000. And then now that they have the pay-per-view, the way they have it structured, the pay-per-view on ESPN, the fighters are losing even more money on back-end money. because of the way that the pay-per-view is. Because people now people have to go on the app, I think, to buy the pay-per-view. But I'm not sure. Can they? I think they can go on the television and buy pay-per-view too. But $500,000 a fight for the guarantee. Think about that. He's not even guaranteed $1 million for his fights. That's disgraceful. $500,000 a fight. And this is the best fighter in the UFC. Arguably the best fighter of all time in history of the sport of MMA. And he's guaranteed $500,000. There's this there's just no explanation for that. There's just no explanation for that. He has every right to be upset. He has every right to be upset. Every right to be upset. There's just no way anyone can justify him only getting $500,000. Now, Conor McGregor, he's guaranteed to fight Cowboy Cerrone when he came back in 2020. He was guaranteed $3 million. So why is he getting 3.5 times more than what Jon Jones is getting? And he was coming off a loss. You have to look at that and scratch your head when you think about it. These guys must be getting a shitload of back-end money off pay-per-view. Shitload. But even still, you can say, well, Conor McGregor sells more than Jon Jones. Okay, that's fine. You could say that. But does he sell 4 times more? Does he sell 4 times more the amount of pay-per-views that Jon Jones does? I'm not against Conor McGregor making more than Jon Jones, but that much more? Almost 4 times more than Jon Jones? That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is total ridiculous. It's a shame. It's a shame. So I guess they're saying with the he had 3 fights 2020. He fought Gustafsson, Smith, and Santos. Okay, and he earned $500,000 for each of those fights. Oh, well, we paid the other fighters. Oh, really? Guess what his opponents got? Gustafsson got 30,000. Smith got 40,000. Santos got 40,000, and Reyes got 40,000. How are you paying the challenger of a title fight $40,000? And now Dana White's like, oh, well, we spread it around. Like in boxing, only the top guys. Really? You tell me how much Andrew Ruiz made as the challenger against Anthony Joshua in both fights. $5 million and $9 million. How in the world can you challenge for a light heavyweight title in a main event and you're paying the challenger $30,000 or $40,000? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So in boxing, you have a totally different dynamic. You have people in the business, promoters and networks and the such, saying that fighters are getting overpaid. Stark contrast to UFC. Boxing's doing so bad, but fighters are being accused of being overpaid. Not underpaid, overpaid. You never hear as much as you do in the UFC about complaints about fighters getting underpaid in the sport of boxing. Boxers are making more now across the board as a whole than ever before. Everyone's getting paid. And that's because these big networks like ESPN and Fox have injected money back into the sport. And it's really benefited the fighters. It's really benefited the fighters. So that's a good thing, guys. That's really a good thing. So I suspect that Jon Jones will fight for the heavyweight title, possibly in his next fight. And hopefully he can get a guarantee of more than $500,000. He probably will. But how much more? Will he get that $3 million? And here's the thing. Conor McGregor got a $3 million guarantee, and it wasn't even a title fight. It wasn't even a title fight. Think about that. Think about that. How crazy is that? Jim says that Reebok deal was horrible for the fighters. They could no longer have sponsors on their shorts like they did. Yeah. Again, it's the way the UFC is run as a business. If you're a fighter in the UFC, you got to be saying to yourself, "Shit, I wish I got into boxing. I wish I got into boxing." But who knows if all these guys would be as successful in boxing as they were in the UFC. But Conor McGregor made the highest payday of his career in a boxing match. It's a fact. It's a fact. That's what I said, Metatruth. I agree with you. So John's lost versus Reyes. The UFC wants to run that fight back, yet Jones doesn't want to lose in light heavyweight. If he loses at heavyweight and gets the last payout, then he isn't worried about his legacy. Well, why not? Here's the problem with Jones. He should have, when Cormier was the heavyweight champion, he should have fought Cormier at heavyweight, but he didn't want to do it. So partly that's his fault. But again, there's nothing you can say to justify Jones, a main event fighter, only getting $500,000 a fight. And he's been getting that for like his last four or five fights. For the last couple of years, he's been getting that. His pay has not bumped up at all. If you're stuck in that in that same pay scale like that, that's a bad look. That's a real bad look. To be perfectly honest with you, that's a horrible look. I got to be honest with you. That's just disgusting. You know, Khabib versus McGregor actually did 2.4 million pay-per-view buys, where his fight with McGregor did 2.2 million pay-per-view buys. So Conor McGregor is definitely a big star. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. But Jones still gets in the 800,000 to 900,000 range in his pay-per-view fights. His numbers are nothing to sneeze at. His numbers are nothing to sneeze at. They're really not. You can't complain about the numbers. You definitely can't complain about the numbers there. The UFC still does decent pay-per-view numbers, guys. They still do. They did, like, all the shows do pretty good. They do pretty good. And here's the thing that like the UFC pay-per-views are only like $64, $65. Whereas the boxing pay-per-views are like $80. So that's a difference right there. So obviously that's another thing. Another difference is boxing pay-per-views are more expensive. They're just more expensive. They're just more expensive. So it's just a different dynamic at all. It's just a different dynamic. Grievous says it's always been the same. B, boxing is where the money is at the top level, especially the heavyweights. Yeah, that's correct. That's definitely correct. It's totally correct. Even Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson, that pay-per-view did 700,000 pay-per-view buys. So Jones is doing like in the eight in between the 8 to 9 million, 800,000 to 900,000, close to a million pay-per-view buys. So Jones is still attracting he's still generating a lot of pay-per-view buys. He's still popular. So if Conor McGregor is getting 3 million a fight, and his pay-per-view numbers on average are about probably 1.5 to 1.8 million pay-per-view buys, basically about twice what Jon Jones makes in terms of pay-per-view buys, what he generates. So then he should at least get $1.5 million guaranteed purse instead of 500,000. So the pay scale is just horrible when it comes to Jon Jones. There's no way you can get around that. Alexander Wilson says Dana White expects UFC to lose over 100 million in 2020 due to lack of live gates. Interesting. Yeah, well, again, a lot of these combat sports entities are going to be losing a shitload of money. Mike O'Brien says, I can't remember the last time McGregor had a pay-per-view below 1 million buys. Neither can I. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. Make sure you check out the Ringside Reporter podcast later this afternoon, or this evening, I should say, at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Eric and I will jump back on here later. Thank you for the super chats, and I will catch you guys later. Have a great day. Take care, everyone.